Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Yeah, likely Lynn Cullen and maybe her dog too, because normally people come to pick him up and get him out of here before the show starts, but they're running late, and so you might hear some blue barking, okay, which is always a possibility, because he's sitting there at the door knowing they're late, and he'll probably bark when he sees them. Anyway, how you doing? Welcome. It's the 13th of June. Oh God. And I was thinking, you know what? Somebody tell me to stop watching MSNBC. Okay? Because it's not that they're not saying things and bringing things to people's attention that shouldn't be brought to people's attention. It's just that if you ingest too much of it, it's hard not to get truly depressed and frightened. Frightened, I think, is the main thing. That's it's one thing to feel down about things happening, but when you start feeling frightened, I mean, truly frightened, that's a whole different feeling, and it's I don't know. I'm not used to it. I've always prided myself on not being easily scared, and I'm scared. And it's at this late stage in my life to have to feel that kind of fear, a fear of losing things that are precious to me, that I had never ever even considered could happen in my life. I don't know. I'm just telling you that I'm really a bit on edge, and I keep telling you to, pace yourselves. On the other hand, pay attention. On the other hand, take care of yourself. On the other, I don't know, where it's new territory for us all to be navigating, and it's just scary. It is. Speaking of scary, I saw this little item that I wonder if I'm watching the right things. I don't watch a lot of television news, and I sometimes fear that I'm saying things that to you are old hat when maybe I've just discovered them. But I had not seen this relatively frightening story, I must say, about the capture of, was it 8 men, no less than 8 men from Turkmenistan? No, Tajikistan. It's one of the stands. And I believe Tajikistan is the hotbed of ISIS recruits. It was Tajiks who made a bloodbath out of that concert in Moscow, doing the bidding of at some radical Islamic, I don't know if it was ISIS or whatever. But 8 Tajikis were arrested last weekend in different cities in this country, all believed to have entered the country surreptitiously and illegally on our southern border, and made their way to Philadelphia, New York, Los Angeles, and thank God, the people whose job it is to keep us safe, the FBI, for instance, were onto them, were aware, and simply kept them, tracked. And when they felt the moment was right, arrested them. But why would they have been here? If again you've been paying any attention, I seem to recall the FBI director, Christopher Wray, at one point at a congressional hearing warning the members of the committee and us that in his entire tenure, he has never seen red lights flashing in every venue, domestic terror, terror like this, people coming in specifically to, and this, so probably what was done by this arrest was was saving a whole bunch of Americans from, I'm sure, what would have been a terrorist attack. So, we go on blithely with our lives and we think, I mean, what else are we going to do? That's what we're going to do. But again, I just want to say, if they had been successful, this could have doomed Joe Biden's presidential run. And we're 5 months out of the vote. So I just am in a constant state of, I guess, terror. I have no idea how to parse or come to terms with or understand the news that these two old women, Leslie Benningfield Randall and Viola Ford Fletcher, having lived well over 100 years, they are 109 and 110. They are still alive. And I don't know how to come to terms with what they, at this ridiculous late stage in their lives, have to come to terms with the Oklahoma Supreme Court denying their plea that something be done to hold someone responsible for the massacre of over 300 people in their hometown, Tulsa, almost 100 years ago. They were two survivors of the Tulsa race massacre, children. Can you imagine enduring that level of terror and horror? And still, 100 years later, seeking from the justice system of the country, of your country, some measure of accountability, and being turned away. You know, the Tulsa race massacre is something I never learned about. Odds are you never learned about. Most of us are aware of it now. Most of us. I don't think most Americans. And it was a result of the success of the Black community in Tulsa. An amazing story of community building up a marvelous, strong, thriving neighborhood, successful business district. They were living the American dream. And that was just too much for a whole bunch of the white folks in Tulsa to bear. In 2 horrific days, a 35 city block area of Tulsa where these Black Americans were living was literally leveled. Even leveled from the air. Bombs were dropped on them. There was no doubt as to what the intent was, to total destruction. There was nothing left. They were homeless. They'd lost everything they had. Over 300 lost their lives. And no one ever was held responsible. No survivors who lost everything were ever compensated in any way. And these two, still standing, tried one more time and were turned away again. Now, I understand that it could well be, if you parse the law, the Oklahoma Supreme Court's decision might make some sense, as they said, in turning away these two petitioners. The continuing blight alleged within the Greenwood community, because that once thriving, it had been called the Black Wall Street. It was a testament to what Black America could do if left alone. And now it's just, and has been for 100 years, just a rundown neighborhood that people live in. And the court said the continuing blight alleged within the Greenwood community born out of the massacre, they do acknowledge that, implicates generational and societal inequities that can only be resolved by policymakers, not the courts. They said it just doesn't fall within the scope of the law, the statute, to support a claim for reparations. And my guess is that even justices who might have wanted to do something really saw that the law was not going to allow it. And because this was state law and a state court, I guess this is it. There's no appeal to be done. I just can't imagine to live 110 years and your country is incapable. You see, and you must live with and die with the knowledge, incapable of justice. Because clearly, this white mob got away with murder, mass murder. And that suggests something very, 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 very wrong in our system. If there is no redress for something so outrageous, so ungodly and horrific, and even in a span of 100 years, nothing. I don't know how to process that story. It makes me sick. It just makes me sick. Well, apparently the board of Tesla caved, and Musk got his I was saying 50 yesterday. Got his $45 billion bonus. Unbelievable. Nothing wrong here. Just keep moving. Nothing to see here. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Okay. I'm apologizing for lack of happy news. Although I did see one thing. I am excited about it. Why didn't I know about this? I guess I found this out through one of the nonprofit news sources that I use, local. Have you been to or are aware of the Museum of Illusions that is here in Pittsburgh? I mean, we are a city of many museums, wondrous museums. We are rich in that. But I never even heard of it. The Museum of Illusions. And it's over on the North Shore, I guess, near. This is breaking. The Supreme Court unanimously rejected a bid to curtail access to abortion pills. And they did it because they said the plaintiffs, and it's true, did not have any standing to bring the suit. So access to medication abortion with the pill, and that is by far the most common way abortions are gotten, is now is still there. So the court did not rule on the central issue. They just said that those bringing the suit lack standing. What I don't understand is if those bringing the suit lacked standing, then why did the court agree to hear it in the first place? These are things I just don't understand anything anymore. I mean, I know if Susan were here, she'd explain it to me, but they would know before at some point when the court decides, oh, we'll take this case, we won't take that case. Maybe maybe it's all just political and they took the case to make it look like they weren't the anti-abortion court because they knew they could give this one to the other side. I don't get it. Anyway, the Museum of Illusions, and apparently it's just a lot of fun, and it's um, you have to have an appointment. You have to get your ticket in advance, I think. Um, says it's $25 for adults, and you have a specific time when you go because it's one of those things that's immersive, and you can't have a million people in there at the same time. So people have to, come in and get through it um, in an orderly fashion. So I'm just saying, I hadn't even heard of it, and I can't wait. A lot of stuff that you get to do that is it's it's about understanding scientific concepts, but they say it is so much fun and a lot of illusion, a lot of mirrors, a lot of making you feel like you're walking on the ceiling and stuff like that. I don't know. Anyway, I'm all excited about it and I'm just passing it on to you. It's the only thing that didn't upset me that I ingested yesterday. Well, I ingested food. I wasn't upset by it. Thank God. Okay. I want to note the passing of Howard Fineman, who was a Pittsburgh kid and a very, very respected journalist. He died at the age of 75, pancreatic cancer. I followed him on Twitter, and he was such a sort of, you could tell, sort of a sweet nerd. I mean, he would post pictures of him and his wife, Amy. It was always Amy, here's Amy and me. And they always looked so happy and they were doing, things. They were at Disneyland, they were whatever. He was just seemed like a good fellow. And I do know a lot of Pittsburgh people who certainly grew up with him. He's my age range, and so I know a lot of his childhood friends. They're dying too. God. So, yeah, I think he went to Alderdice, lived in Squirrel Hill, grew up on the corner of what is that? That's Whiteman and Beacon, I believe. And yeah, a good Pittsburgh guy, always and often came home here. The obit suggests that, oh, shut up, no, 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 no. The obit suggests that he was always ahead of the game. He just had this understanding of where journalism was going. And so he started as a print reporter at the Louisville Courier-Journal. Does it even exist anymore? Yeah. He was there, and that's where he got his, learned how to be a reporter. And then he went off to Newsweek magazine. Now stop and think about that. Newsweek magazine, at the time when Newsweek was, just huge, Newsweek and Time, and they're all pretty much gone now too. So we're losing print, we're losing, but he was always sort of a step ahead. And he's the one who figured out that cable news was the next frontier. And he's credited in the obit as being one of the first Washington journalists to recognize the impact that cable news was going to have on the news industry. And so he was one of the first print reporters to pop up on cable news shows. He was everywhere in the early 80s on television. He was still at Newsweek doing his thing, but he was there. And I remember talking to, I can't remember who I was talking to, but they were so right. They talked about the danger of print reporters, of journalists becoming celebrities. That with cable news and the lure and allure of being on TV and having millions of people know what you think, be aware of your work, recognizable to them, that this was, and it paid, that this would do a disservice to journalism because people will choose celebrity over anonymity. And it skews the way a reporter then thinks. So E.J. Dionne, the Times, New York Times, I think Dionne is with the Times, right? I can't even think anymore. He said that Howard was a pioneer in making that transition between a time when print was the most powerful force to a time when television took over. And then he was ahead of the game again when he astonished people by leaving Newsweek for the Huffington Post, which was just beginning to build its news operation online. He saw that it was now journalism was going to move online. And he was always ahead of the game. And as in his later years, in the last few years, he worried because, as somebody who seemed so prescient, he didn't like what he saw in terms of where we were going. And the obit ends thusly. He worried that the desire for fame and fortune had gutted the political journalism core. Yep. Just as technological and social change were tearing apart the traditional news media. But he added, only a re-energized news industry can reverse the nation's downward course. He saw how important media is, and he saw it going in the wrong direction. And if he was thinking only the news media can save us, then folks, we're, pardon the expression, fucked. These are his words. We are in what I view as a new global world war. A war for control of the search for truth. We have to mobilize our truth-seeking strength to survive. For America and for democracy to survive. Howard Fineman. You know, it doesn't make me feel better that some of our more illustrious journalistic organs, too, are being taken over by the Brits. And I'm sure you're aware of that. We already know what the Aussie than Rupert Murdoch did to our journalism here, with Fox News then gobbling up the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post. But I had mentioned, I think a week or so ago, that now the Washington Post has been taken over by the Brits as well. Their new chief executive, the one who got rid of the really wonderful woman who had been in charge, the executive editor, and replaced her with another London reporter. The Wall Street Journal is now headed by a Brit. The guy who runs CNN now is formerly from the BBC. And Bloomberg News, also run by a Brit. The Associated Press has a Brit as its chief executive. And even getting into the internet outlets, the Daily Beast, also an English woman, and she has happily installed other Brits. She has a Scott as editor in chief of the Daily Beast, and a former Guardian reporter as Washington bureau chief. So here we have this, this British invasion into something as well. There is a national character to journalism, and British journalism is different than American journalism. They swing elbows more. They are known to pay people for information, something that is verboten here. I don't know. The guy who now heads the Washington Post is known to have spent money to get a story. And that's that's something now that just wouldn't, it just doesn't align with what an American learns in as proper ethics in journalism school. I don't know. I've been watching it, aware of it. I don't know. I don't mean to sound as if these Brits are necessarily bad, but with so many, well, there's fewer and fewer positions for journalism in this country, and never has there been a more important time for journalism, as Howard Fineman knew. For American journalists to stand up and help save this country. Robert saying that Keith Olbermann had a nice mention of Howard Fineman today as a friend and as a reporter. Yeah, he was very well liked. There's nobody who would. I know many people here who really considered him a pal. Milton, thank you as usual. So this case that the court said they had no standing was the Federal Drug Administration versus Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine. And they were given standing by the Fifth Circuit Court. What? Okay, so although the majority of the court agreed with the FDA that the plaintiffs didn't have standing, Alito and Thomas, oh, shocker here, supported the Fifth Circuit's ruling. So the case proceeded to a full argument in the court. So even though they ultimately ruled against the pill ban, it was, Milton tells us, Alito and Thomas that allowed the case to be heard, to waste the court's time. They can't seem to find time to rule whether or not Donald Trump, they haven't ruled in those cases, but this, they had, they were fine taking their time doing this. God, those two. Good God in heaven, help us. Jurors have spoken in the Hunter, some of them have spoken out in the Hunter Biden case, and they've pretty much said that the law, just didn't give them anything but, I mean, that they felt he was guilty. They also seem to suggest that they thought the case was ridiculous and a waste of their time and taxpayer money, and they felt great sympathy for him. So this is our justice system. If there's a theme today, it's our justice system not rising to the occasion. Sort of nowhere to go to get it. Justice. It reminds me of a speech my dad gave in the 50s to a high school class. I don't know why I know this. Why do I know this? But it was titled Justice, We Pursue Thee. And it's funny. I'm sort of chuckling to myself because that was just something he cared about so much. Justice. It can be very slippery, hard to get. I mentioned yesterday, I think it was yesterday, about this horrific mob in New York City. They were in the subways looking for Jews. They were outside this exhibit in Lower Manhattan that was featuring portraits of the hundreds and hundreds of people who were killed by Hamas at the Nova Music Festival. And I told you that I saw a video, and it was so horrific you couldn't even believe it. What the crowd was chanting, and essentially it was like death to the Jews. It was unbelievable. And I'm not aware. So this pro-Palestinian crowd, we are seeing an ugliness that is part of it, that unless the other part of it, assuming there is another part of it that is truly concerned with trying to solve this complex issue, they better clean house. They better disavow those that are standing with them, because ain't nobody going to be standing with them if they keep this crap up. One member of Congress from New York about the mob said the callousness, the dehumanization the targeting of Jews on display at that protest outside the exhibit was atrocious anti-Semitism, plain and simple. That was not said by a Republican. That was not said by a Jew. It was said by a progressive member of Congress, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Despicable, said the mayor. The White House says heartbreaking, outrageous. And because these haters and are such idiots in so many ways, all they've succeeded in doing is harming the very movement they purport to be a part of. And they are also, what they did was ensure that that exhibit is going to stay up for longer than it had been scheduled. It's going to be up there longer because more and more people now are aware of it, more people want to support it, and they are coming. And in other Jew news, and in other exhibition news, exhibitions of Jew news, who knew there was such a category? On one day, I come upon numerous stories about exhibitions of Jews drawing all kinds of turmoil and vitriol and this one, and I'm looking at the headline. Exhibition on Jews will be revised. Now, this is not the exhibition in New York. This is an exhibition on the other coast of our country in LA. This is an exhibition at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures. And the Academy, anyone who's an old film lover like I am, who watches TCM, knows all about the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures. It's supposed to be wondrous. The exhibit's amazing. And they opened it in 2021 with exhibits that were celebrating the diversity of the film industry. And the folks who went to it mostly found it really interesting and good, but a lot of them walked out incredulous because one group was totally omitted in this celebration of the diversity of Hollywood. Yeah, Jews. Now, I mean, it's laughable. And I'm wondering, why are Jews always such a problematic thing? You're celebrating diversity, but Jews don't get to be part of that. You're celebrating Hollywood, and you don't point out that by and large it was Jewish immigrants who founded it. MGM. The G is Goldwyn, right? Jewish immigrant. Louis B. Mayer, another one. Who am I forgetting here? I mean, it's just, It's ridiculous. So there was all this hewing and crying, and you got to be kidding. And so the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures says, you are absolutely right. And so they unveiled last month that oversight from its opening in 2021. And they last month unveiled the permanent new exhibition highlighting the formative role that Jews, especially Jewish immigrants, played in the founding of the American film industry. Now, one film director who had served on the inclusivity committee saw the exhibit and immediately resigned. Others who went to see it were so astonished they could barely breathe. Because unlike all the other parts of the museum that, paint this positive picture, the Jewish part spends a lot of time totally trashing and vilifying the Jews that it purports to be celebrating. And a whole bunch of Jews in the industry wrote a letter. Over 300 of them signed it so far. And the letter says in part, while we acknowledge the value in confronting Hollywood's problematic past, the despicable double standard of the Jewish Founders exhibit, blaming only the Jews for that problematic past, is unacceptable. And we call on the Academy Museum to redo this exhibit so that it celebrates the Jewish founders with the same respect and enthusiasm granted to those celebrated throughout the rest of the museum. Now, look, apparently, anytime you're looking at an institution that began 100 years ago or more, obviously, I've read a lot of history of these characters. They were, many of them, not likable characters, but they were smart. They were smart cookies, and they created Hollywood. I don't know. Says here in the article, some critics took issue with what they saw as the exhibition's implication that Hollywood's Jewish pioneers had discriminated against other groups as a way to assimilate. Noting, for instance, the movie The Jazz Singer, that first talkie, which had a Jew in blackface as the lead. But that was, that's racism. That was obvious and apparent in America in the 20s, in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. Need I go on? And as one Hollywood writer pointed out, so with the Jews, they make this point. Nothing, though, is said of D.W. Griffith, the storied director whose racist film, Birth of a Nation, celebrated the Ku Klux Klan. That's all in the museum, but nothing gets said about the racism of it. It's just talks about. So, I mean, this is just really, it is incredible. Or they say Walt Disney is made into this hero. Nothing is said of all the racist crap. I mean, if you're going to talk about the jazz singer, well, then talk about those early cartoons. But they don't. It's just with the Jews they did. It is only the Jews who are accused of all of these things. Oh. Jew news. The chief executive of the Anti-Defamation League said upon seeing the exhibit, "We are both shocked and surprised that the Academy made an effort to get this right and somehow seems to have gotten it all wrong." Oh, those pesky, problematic Jews. They're always causing trouble for somebody. Oh, okay. What we got here? Chris writes, hang on. I can't see it. I'm sorry. I screwed up my computer here. Something about Howard Fineman. Hang on. I'm sorry. This is why I can't. If I had, I'm trying to take in information while I realize that then if I'm reading, I'm not talking. I'm sorry. Hang on here. Chris writes, "I just tuned in, so I don't know if you talked about this or not. Heard this morning. Yeah, Howard Fineman. Yes. Yes, Chris, I did. We did. Thank you, though. I'm sorry. Damn. Hey, I remember talking about this horrific story a few years ago, when the pandemic was upon us, and the feds were giving out all kinds of money to help businesses stay afloat, to help people because schools were closed and a lot of children get many of their meals at school, to keep kids from, not going hungry, all this kind of stuff. And I remember I read this just horrific story about a bunch of people in Minneapolis who had gotten more than $40 million from the government because they set up a program and they were going to be feeding hungry children through a nonprofit called Feeding Our Future. This was, I guess, outside of Minneapolis. And they just friggin' took the money. There were 70 people involved in this theft. And now I'm seeing 5 of them were just convicted. I want to just update it. The 5 convicted were among 70 people charged with stealing a total of $250 million from the federal food aid program in Minnesota. And it is, $250 million, which of course is just a pittance when we look at Elon Musk's bonus, but still, used to seem like a lot of money, didn't it? It's described as one of the largest fraud cases the Department of Justice has ever prosecuted. So if over 70 people were charged, this is just the conviction of 5 of them. They claim to be using the money to be serving meals to children during the pandemic, but they a little bit. Instead, they use the money to buy luxury cars, custom homes, cryptocurrency, liquor, yada, 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 yada. And in the course of the trial, lo and behold, one of the members of the jury was offered a bribe. Jesus. Well, so anyway, they got 5 of them, 65 more to go. Unbelievable. I mean, the circles of hell, that's got to be one of the lower circles of hell. Somebody who literally steals money meant to feed children. That's about as low as you can go, I would think. God almighty. Uh-oh. The Supreme Court. Oh, Jesus Christ. The Supreme Court has ruled in favor of Starbucks. Give me a break. In a challenge against a labor ruling by a federal judge, making it more difficult for the government to intervene, for the National Labor Relations Board, I imagine, yes, to intervene when a company is accused of illegally suppressing labor organizing. Okay, so this is the courts come out with an anti-labor vote. What? 8 justices backed the opinion. Only Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote a separate opinion concurring with parts of the opinion. Oh, we're finished. It's over. It's over. Okay, so this was, well, I give up. The Supreme Court, throughout its history, has been notoriously anti-labor in its rulings. Just notoriously anti-labor. Any case involving labor, if you take it to the Supreme Court, you are, yeah, the odds are you are going to be mightily disappointed. Just a few quickies so you stay up to date on what the Republicans are up to. The Republican National Committee and other GOP-linked groups have already filed, speaking of the courts, dozens of lawsuits in 25 states about the election that hasn't even occurred yet. They already are just peppering the legal system with bullshit. Some of these cases seek to prevent states from counting mail-in ballots that are missing a date, We've seen this here. Others are challenging the accuracy of voter registration lists. All of this is designed to help Republicans win by suppressing our vote, by not having our votes be counted. And this, the Colorado Republican Party last week sent a mass email with the subject line, "God hates pride." This was an anti-LGBT tirade. It denounced Pride Month as a time when, quote, godless groomers attack all that is decent, holy, and righteous. And this same wonderful bunch of Americans, Republicans, also put out on Elon Musk's platform, Twitter, "Burn all the pride flags." Wow. Wow. I started out by saying I'm frightened. I will end with reiterating I'm frightened, and I believe I have good reason to be. All right, guys, it's heating up out there, heating up pretty much everywhere, and keep your cool. God knows I don't think I'll be able to keep mine, but we'll give it the old college try, and have a good weekend, and I'll talk to you again Monday. The good Lord willing, and the creeks don't rise.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.